Ever heard of a weapon so ingenious it could turn a ship into a battlefield?
Oh, I think I might have a guess.
Well, that's just one of the surprises waiting for you in this deep dive into the First Punic War.
Okay.
A 23-year struggle between Rome and Carthage for control of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
We've got ancient accounts, modern analysis, even some historical fiction to bring this clash of titans to life.
That sounds amazing. It's incredible how much material has survived from that period.
Right. It really lets us get a feel for the personalities and the stakes involved.
What's fascinating about this conflict, I think, is that it wasn't just a border skirmish.
Right.
It was a clash of cultures.
Yeah.
Almost a preview of the global power struggles we see today.
That's a great point.
I mean, you've got these two rising powers with very different ways of life,
Yeah.
different values, different economic systems.
So let's set the scene, shall we? It's the 3rd century BC,
Okay.
Rome, the up-and-coming power on the Italian peninsula, with their legions and a hunger for expansion.
Right, the classic image of Roman might.
Exactly.
And across the sea, you have Carthage.
Yeah.
The established maritime superpower, a trading empire with roots stretching back centuries.
A real force to be reckoned with.
Oh, absolutely. They controlled trade routes all across the Mediterranean.
And their wealth and influence were legendary.
They're like the old money to Rome's new ambition.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Old money versus new ambition.
It captures that tension, that rivalry that was already brewing.
So they're both expanding, they're both looking for new opportunities,
Mhm.
but as they both flex their muscles,
Right.
there's one place they just can't seem to share.
Let me guess. Sicily.
Bingo. That strategically vital island right in the middle of the Mediterranean.
The crossroads of the ancient world.
Precisely. Control Sicily, and you control the sea lanes.
It became the focal point for their ambitions. Almost a proxy battleground for who would control the ancient world's most important sea lanes.
So tell me, was war inevitable?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Could these two rising powers have found a way to coexist peacefully? Well, some historians argue that conflict was baked into the very nature of Roman society. They were constantly pushing boundaries, testing their strength, and rarely backing down from a challenge.
They had a reputation for being very assertive.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Assertive, expansionist, ambitious.
In Carthage.
Well, Carthage had a long history of defending their interests.
Right.
And they weren't about to let Rome walk all over them.
This all kicks off in Messina, a Sicilian city right across from the toe of Italy.
Okay.
A band of mercenaries, the Mamertines, seize control of the city,
Mercenaries always causing trouble.
setting off a chain of events that pulls both Rome and Carthage into the fray.
A classic case of a local conflict escalating into a much larger one.
Right.
You know, it's like a domino effect.
Yeah.
One little push and the whole thing comes tumbling down.
And the Mamertines, in a desperate bid to hold on to their ill-gotten gains, appealed to both powers for help.
Playing both sides against each other?
Yeah. A risky strategy.
Oh, very risky. It could easily backfire.
And that's where Rome takes a gamble that could have easily backfired.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
With virtually no naval experience, they decide to challenge the mighty Carthaginian fleet.
Wow, that's audacious.
It was a bold move.
A sign that Rome was willing to risk it all for a chance at expanding their power.
But how on earth could they hope to compete with a naval power like Carthage, who practically ruled the waves?
I mean, Carthage had centuries of experience at sea.
Right.
Their ships were some of the finest in the ancient world.
They had skilled sailors, experienced commanders.
And Rome, well, they were a land power.
It would be like challenging a shark to a swimming race.
That's a good analogy.
So how do they even begin to level the playing field?
That's where Roman ingenuity comes in.
Okay.
They captured a Carthaginian ship, studied it carefully, and then used it as a model to build their own fleet.
Talk about reverse engineering.
They weren't afraid to learn from their enemies.
But even with a newly built fleet, they knew they couldn't match the Carthaginians in terms of seamanship.
Right. Experience counts for a lot in naval warfare.
And naval tactics.
So they came up with a solution that was both brilliant and brutal.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did they do?
The Corvus.
The Corvus. Tell us more about this Corvus.
It was essentially a boarding bridge with a large metal spike that could be dropped onto enemy ships, locking them together.
So imagine the shock of the Carthaginians, used to elegant maneuvers and ramming tactics, suddenly finding themselves in hand-to-hand combat with Roman soldiers.
It was like turning a naval battle into a land battle, playing right into Rome's strengths.
It's brilliant. It's like they completely changed the rules of the game.
Exactly.
And it worked.
Oh, yes, it worked.
So tell me about the first big test of this corvus.
In 260 BC, at the Battle of Mylae, the Romans scored a stunning victory,
Wow.
capturing or sinking dozens of Carthaginian ships.
That must have been a humiliating defeat for Carthage.
It certainly bruised their pride.
How did they respond? Did they just give up and say, okay, Rome, you win, take Sicily?
Oh, not at all. They were bruised, but far from defeated. They still held vast territories, a powerful fleet, and a deep-seated determination to maintain their power in the region.
So this was just the first round.
The opening salvo in a long and brutal war.
And remember, for Carthage, Sicily was more than just a strategic outpost. It was practically a part of their homeland.
They had deep historical and cultural ties to the island.
So they were not going to give it up easily.
No, they were determined to fight for every inch of ground.
All right, so we've got Rome emboldened by their naval victory. Carthage reeling but determined to fight back. What happens next in this epic struggle for control of the Mediterranean?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting.
Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back after a short break.
So by 250 BC, the Carthaginians were hanging on by a thread in Sicily. Only 2 major strongholds remaining. And it's at this point that another legendary figure takes the stage. Hamilcar Barca?
Ah, yes, Hamilcar.
Yeah.
I feel like we've been building up to his entrance this whole time.
Well, he's a key figure in this conflict.
So what made him such a standout leader?
Well, he was a brilliant strategist.
Okay.
And a cunning tactician, but he was also a master of adaptation.
I see.
Facing a seemingly impossible situation in Sicily.
Right.
He understood that he couldn't win a conventional war against the Romans.
So he had to think outside the box.
He had to change the game.
So instead of big set-piece battles, he was going for a war of attrition.
Precisely.
Wearing the Romans down through constant pressure and harassment.
Keep them off balance, disrupt their supply lines.
And to feel like they can never rest.
Exactly. Make every victory a Pyrrhic one.
He sounds like a real thorn in their side.
He was a constant source of frustration for the Roman commanders.
So did his tactics work?
For a time, they were quite effective.
Okay.
He managed to keep the Romans at bay, prevent them from delivering a decisive blow.
So he's buying time for Carthage.
He's buying time. He's keeping them in the fight.
But even Hamilcar's brilliance couldn't change the fundamental realities of the war.
Yeah. In the end, Carthage was simply outmatched.
Outmatched in terms of
resources, manpower, and ultimately willpower.
They were running out of money.
Right.
Their resources were dwindling.
And the Romans were relentless in their pursuit of victory.
It just wouldn't give up.
It was almost like they were fueled by their losses.
So what happened next? Did the Romans finally manage to crush Hamilcar's resistance?
They did.
Okay.
But it took a final, all-out effort.
How so?
Well, in 242 BC, the Romans, desperate to end the stalemate, built yet another fleet.
Wow, another one.
This one financed by patriotic loans from wealthy citizens.
Talk about putting your money where your mouth is.
It was a huge gamble.
A last-ditch effort to break Carthage's naval power once and for all.
And this time, the gamble paid off.
Tell me about it.
The Roman fleet, under the command of Lutatius Catulus, surprised the Carthaginian fleet off the Aegates Islands.
Where are the Aegates Islands?
They're west of Sicily.
Got it.
The result was a decisive Roman victory.
Okay.
The Carthaginian fleet was shattered, and their hopes of holding on to Sicily were dashed.
It's almost like the air went out of their sails.
It was a crushing defeat both strategically and psychologically.
I can only imagine.
It was a turning point in the war.
After this, was there any hope for Carthage?
Well, at that point, it was clear that the war was lost. Hamilcar, realizing the futility of further resistance, was forced to seek terms.
So the war is over?
The First Punic War, yes.
What were the terms of the peace treaty?
Well, the peace treaty, though harsh, allowed Carthage to survive, but at a steep price, they had to cede Sicily to Rome.
Okay, so they lose Sicily.
Pay a large indemnity.
Right, a financial penalty.
And relinquish any claims to Sardinia.
Oh, wow. So they lose Sardinia, too.
It was a humiliating end to the war.
Talk about adding insult to injury.
It was a bitter pill to swallow.
And it sowed the seeds for future conflict.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the First Punic War ends.
Yeah.
But the rivalry between Rome and Carthage is far from over.
It's just the first chapter in a much larger story,
A story that will continue to unfold in the decades to come.
with even higher stakes and even more dramatic consequences.
So stay with us as we delve deeper into this epic clash of civilizations. So we left off with Carthage rebuilding in Spain under Hasdrubal the Fair,
Yeah.
while young Hannibal waits for his moment.
Right, biding his time.
What happens that sets him on the path to becoming Rome's ultimate nemesis?
Well, it's a twist of fate, really.
Okay.
In 221 BC, Hasdrubal is assassinated, leaving a power vacuum in Spain.
I see.
The Carthaginian troops there, many of whom fought alongside Hamilcar, and saw Hannibal grow up, proclaim him their new commander.
So it's just 29 years old?
Yeah, still quite young.
Hannibal steps into his father's shoes.
And he's ready to make his mark.
I'm sensing this is where things really escalate.
Oh, you could say that.
In what way?
Well, Hannibal quickly asserts his control.
Okay.
And then makes a move that shocks even his own people.
Okay, what does he do?
He sets his sights on the Roman allied city of Saguntum in Spain.
Saguntum.
Yeah, it was a strategic location and a symbol of Roman influence in the region.
Attacking a city allied with Rome.
It was a bold move.
The direct provocation, isn't it? It's almost like he wanted to start a war.
Well, Hannibal was a calculated risk taker.
Yeah.
He likely sensed that Rome, still recovering from the First Punic War, wouldn't be ready for a full-scale conflict.
So he's trying to catch them off guard.
Exactly. Exploit their weakness.
And by taking Saguntum,
he'd gain a strategic foothold and a vital supply base.
A launching pad for further operations.
For what he was really planning?
Okay, you've got me hooked.
Yeah.
What was this grand plan of his?
An invasion of Italy.
What? An invasion of Italy.
Not by sea, as the Romans would expect, but by land.
By land.
He intended to march his army across the Pyrenees Mountains,
through
Gaul, and then over the Alps.
Over the Alps? Are you serious?
Right into the heart of Roman territory.
With an army? That sounds impossible.
It was a feat considered unthinkable by most.
Didn't he have elephants, too?
Oh, yeah, he brought his elephants along.
Elephants over the Alps.
It's one of the most audacious military campaigns in history.
So how did he pull it off?
Well, Hannibal was a logistical genius.
Okay.
He meticulously planned his route, gathered supplies, and prepared his troops.
So this is where his genius for logistics shines through.
Absolutely. Keeping an army supplied and moving through hostile territory, let alone over mountain ranges, is an incredible challenge.
So he sets off, right?
In 218 BC, he set off with his diverse army.
Diverse in what way?
Africans, Iberians, Gauls, Numidians, even those elephants.
Wow, a real melting pot of warriors.
And crossed the Pyrenees, battling hostile tribes along the way.
I can only imagine the shock of the Romans when they hear Hannibal's not sailing towards Sicily, but is appearing out of the Alps on their doorstep.
They were completely caught off guard.
Yeah.
Their intelligence networks were focused on the sea.
Right, they were expecting a naval attack.
They never anticipated an army could traverse those mountains.
It was a strategic masterstroke.
That completely upended Roman expectations.
So Hannibal marches into Italy.
With a vengeance.
What's his game plan once he's there?
Well, he wanted to break Rome's power.
Okay.
Not just militarily, but politically.
How so?
He understood that Rome relied heavily on alliances for its strength. His goal was to dismantle those alliances. Win over Roman subjects to his side.
Turn their own allies against them.
Isolate Rome, making them vulnerable.
So it's not just brute force.
No.
It's a psychological campaign as well.
A war on multiple fronts.
He's playing the long game.
And for a while, it worked brilliantly.
Tell me more.
Over the next few years, Hannibal won a string of stunning victories against the Romans.
Like?
Trivia, Trasimene, Cannae.
Wow, those are some famous battles.
These weren't just wins. They were tactical masterpieces.
This is still studied today.
By military strategists around the world.
So he's outmaneuvering, outsmarting the Romans at every turn.
He was a brilliant tactician.
It sounds like he was unstoppable.
He was incredibly successful.
Right.
But he never quite managed to deliver the knockout blow.
Why not? If he was winning all these battles?
Well, Rome despite suffering heavy losses and near panic, was incredibly resilient.
They had a knack for bouncing back.
They refused to surrender,
Yeah.
constantly raising new legions and adapting their tactics.
They learned from their mistakes.
They were determined to survive.
So how does this incredible campaign, this seemingly unstoppable force of Hannibal,
It's a great question.
how does it all come to an end?
It's a bit anticlimactic in a way.
Oh.
After years of campaigning in Italy,
Yeah.
Hannibal is unable to take Rome itself or completely break their alliances.
So he's stuck in a stalemate.
Eventually, he's forced to return to Africa
And defend Carthage.
from a Roman invasion.
Led by
Scipio Africanus.
Scipio Africanus. That name rings a bell.
He was Rome's answer to
A
Hannibal.
worthy adversary.
In 22 BC, at the Battle of Zama,
Yeah.
these two titans finally clash.
In a showdown for the ages.
That will determine the fate of both empires.
And who wins?
Unfortunately for Hannibal, it's Scipio who emerges victorious.
Oh, after all of that,
All those years of campaign,
after years of brilliant victories,
he finally meets his match.
Hannibal is defeated.
It's a tragic end to such an incredible story.
But even in defeat,
His legacy endures.
what is his legacy?
His tactical genius, his strategic vision,
Yeah.
and his audacity.
Continue to inspire.
Military leaders and strategists to this day.
He pushed Rome to its limits.
He forced them to adapt and evolve.
And in many ways, shaped the future of warfare.
The ripples of his actions are still felt today.
It's amazing to think how these events, these clashes of empires and individuals from over 2,000 years ago, still have relevance and impact today.
They teach us about leadership,
Strategy,
resilience,
and the human cost of conflict.
The Punic Wars were more than just ancient history.
They were a clash of cultures.
A struggle for dominance.
And a testament to the enduring power of human ambition.
Resilience.
And the sometimes tragic consequences of war.
They remind us that the choices we make,
the battles we fight,
can have repercussions that echo through the centuries.
Well, I think we've all learned a great deal from this deep dive into the First Punic War.
I hope so.
It's been a fascinating journey.
Filled with twists and turns.
And incredible insights.
It's a story that continues to fascinate and inspire.
Thank you for guiding us through this complex and fascinating period of history.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We appreciate your support.
Don't forget to subscribe to the deep dive for more fascinating journeys into the past.
We'll be back soon with more mind-blowing stories and insights from history.